Today's video is brought to you by Assiniboine Downs Gaming and Event Center. And be sure to tune in to Trust the Profits Live Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern for Monday Night Lights, hosted by Matthew DeSantis.
Let's cap the Saturday card at Belmont with special guest ACACIA Courtney. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host of this episode of Capping the Card. My name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Welcome to this episode of Capping the Card. And before we get to that, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to get all of our content on Trust the Profits. Make sure to like this video and let us know in the comments below what's your best pick for Saturday's card at Belmont. A lot of great races, obviously highlighted by the Grade 2 Pennine Ridge with some really big hitters in that particular race. And we got a lot of great content here on the channel, so make sure to check out everything that we're doing. Now, if this is your first time tuning in to Capping the Card, the premise is pretty straightforward. We're going to go races 1 through race 10 with myself and a guest. We're going to give you our top pick. We're going to give you some other choices, sometimes a big value play, but we try to keep it pretty quick and snappy. And when we talk about NYRA, there's one person that I always think of first and that I always want to go to, and that is, of course, ACACIA Courtney Clement. And so, ACACIA, thank you so much for taking the time to join me this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me, Matthew.
Yeah, so this is a really nice card that we have, I think, on Saturday. We got, obviously, the big Grade 2 Pennine Ridge, but I think there's a lot of other really nice races on the card as well.
There are. It's a fun card. Of course, it's kind of a nice little appetizer to next weekend, which is the Belmont Stakes Extravaganza from Thursday to Saturday. And just so much good, exciting stuff to look forward to. It's supposed to be a little bit cooler this weekend. It's pretty warm today, but and then a beautiful next week. So we're really lucky. And it's just you can feel the electricity around Belmont Park right now.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to cap this Saturday's card so I could get ready for next Saturday's card at Belmont and get a little bit of a head start. But let's dive right into things here today and go to race number 1, which is a $20,000 maiden claimer going 6 furlongs on the dirt for 3-year-olds and up. And ACACIA, as the guest, I'll let you go first. We both have the same top pick in this race, but talk to me a little bit about what drew you to the horse Irish Empress.
Well, she has the benefit of never having run this low before, and Rudy Rodriguez does seem to kind of have this race surrounded with Baby Socks to the outside and Valentina to the inside. Both of them have been exposed at this level, this 20,000 before, and they both have some early speed. I thought Irish Empress, we were going to see more along the lines of what we saw from her 2 starts back. It was very odd. She came off the layoff last time. She switched to the turf. They took the blinkers off. And then last time she broke out so badly and she really got taken out at the start of the race. Whereas prior to that, she had a little bit of positional speed. So it just seems like Natalia Lynch, now second off the layoff, is going back to basics, back to the dirt. The blinkers are back on. She's also in for this level for the first time. I thought she could potentially set a good trip.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Baby Socks, the one speed horse for Rudy Rodriguez. Valentina, the number 2, is the other one in there. And that's kind of why I ended up with Irish Empress as well. I thought those two might set a little bit of an aggressive pace up front. Irish Empress, I like the addition of blinkers. This is the horse that does seem to always get in trouble early in the race. And I just thought blinkers might help focus, might help concentrate the horse a little bit more, keep her out of some trouble. And I think at 4-1, you're getting a really nice price. And Dylan Davis finally felt like he had a little bit of a breakthrough day. He's been knocking on the door a lot up there at this Belmont meet and had a big day yesterday with 3 wins. So that was one I definitely liked. And then for my value play, I do think the top 3 in this one, Irish Empress, Baby Socks, and Valentina, are very tough to kind of get around. But if you're going to try to play a little bit of a horse at double-digit odds, I do think the number 7, Touche, is kind of interesting. This is a horse that ran 2 times on dirt in maiden special weight races and is now cutting back to 6 furlongs, having gone 1 1/8 miles and a mile the last 2 times out. Tried the turf last time. That was at a maiden claiming 40, now dropping down to a maiden 20. I just thought, maybe there's something there, and you get the class drop now on the right surface. And I thought, the 3 furlong bullet on May 28th looked pretty good. This horse might be able to show a little bit of more speed out of the gate than it has previously. So at 10-1, I thought I'd be take a little bit of shot there. But you obviously have Baby Sox as your second pick. Was there a reason you went with this one over the number 2 Valentina? Very similar horses for Rudy Rodriguez.
They are similar horses, and they both have some early speed. As far as Valentina, I thought that she was one who was kind of dueling in, and as 3 horses came down to the wire, whereas Baby Sox in her last race, she was 3 wide throughout, and she was actually drifting a little bit, and she held the best of the horses that had been forward when the closers came on. So I thought, tactically watching the races and giving a little bit of the wide trip, I thought Baby Sox's race was a little bit better than what we saw from Valentina in her last start. But you're right, they're very similar horses. They have similar running styles. They were both dueling last time, and similar to kind of your angle with Touche, I tried to find somebody who was doing something different in this race. Dropping back down was the big angle for me in this spot.
Absolutely. Well, let's move along to race number 2 on the card, which is a $90,000 maiden special weight going 1 3/8 miles on the inner turf for 3-year-old Knott fillies and mares. And I had a feeling we were going to both end up on a Christophe Clement horse in this race, but I wasn't sure which one for a while. Ultimately, my top pick is the number 8 Preta Touche. And this was one, honestly, I just looked at the race this horse came out of last time out. It just has yielded so many next out winners, with Queen Picasso recently winning the Soaring Softly, Soviet Excess, then coming back from that maiden second place effort to break her maiden, and then come back again to win an optional claimer 75 on the turf at Gulfstream Park. And obviously ran against the favorite Highland Grace as well. But what was particularly interesting to me was in that maiden debut race on March 5th at Gulfstream Park, there was very little passing in that race. Everybody just kind of ran in place, and that's kind of what you saw with the running lines of Preta Touche, just kind of broke 6th and stayed 6th the whole way around. And I just think you're going to get obviously a little bit of a better price at 5-1. The Dam was a stakes winner at 12 furlongs. A lot of things that I just thought made sense for me at a little bit higher of a price than the favorite Highland Grace in the spot.
I completely agree. And you're right, in that debut race down at Gulfstream for Preta Touche, it was dominated on the front end, and Queen Picasso was kind of in that talking spot, kind of a similar trip to what she had when she won the Soaring Softly, and kind of traveling in the 2-pack to take over. But the top 2 finishers ran 2-1 throughout the race. And to me, I thought Preta Touche, who kind of hit the gate a little bit, she was not the fastest out. She was a little bit tight in the first turn, and she's a very big filly. I actually was at Gulfstream that day for that race, and while Queen Picasso was very tough to saddle beforehand, Preta Touche was very classy acting, and just everything about her screams more distance. She's a typical kind of war front build. She's very long in her frame. She's very big, very solid, very laid back type. I think that this is what she's been crying out to do all along, and this is the right spot for her. I also think she's really going to appreciate, with her physicality, Belmont Park much more than Gulfstream in that configuration. I feel the same thing about Settling Storm. However, I'm sure you saw this too, whereas the Queen Picasso race has turned out to be really live moving forward. Root Cause, who was the winner of that March 19th race at Gulfstream, came back and was 8th in her subsequent start at Churchill, even though she was the 1-5 favorite that day down at Gulfstream. But this is another one that's a big galloping type. I just think Preta Touche comes out of the stronger race.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agreed about that. And yeah, digging into those 2 races, certainly a tale of 2 different types of main special weight races in terms of how they came back. One of the horses that I like at a little bit of a price is the number 3 Libretto at 8-1 on the morning line. Listen, Mike Maker going long on the turf is usually not a bad angle in general. And this horse should be lone speed. This is, I think, you look at the past performances and you look at this horse's Time Form US early pace numbers. This horse should be well clear of the rest of the field. And I know this horse has been knocking against the door for 9 races now. This will be the 10th one. Although we just saw yesterday at Belmont, a horse win on its 26th attempt at breaking its maiden. So you never know. But this horse also, they thought enough of him to put her into the grade 3, the very one. And, now comes out of that. And I just think, from a pace standpoint, maybe gets a little loose on the lead, or maybe he's just able to set the fractions that they want up there. And again, Dylan had a nice day yesterday and has been 58% in the money riding so far this meet. So that was one that I had at a little bit of a price. But you also obviously think very highly of the favorite here, Highland Grace, for Barclay Tagg.
Yeah, I had liked her last time, at least on paper, going into the race. And actually, I was in the paddock, and Prerequisite was the one that was the standout in the paddock prior to the race that day for Chad Brown. And she just, I think, ran a little bit of a better race. I also thought that Highland Grace, she didn't look as good in her most recent start as she did down in Florida when I saw her two back. And so I'm hoping that now her second start at Belmont, we're going to see a little bit better from her. She does not need to be as far back as she was in her most recent start. And so I expect her to be a little bit more forward. I also have some concerns with that with Libretto, because I really was not crazy about how she looked last time, how she was moving prior to the race. So, but she is first time for Mike Maker, as the majority of Larry Goichman's horses are going to Horacio de Paz or Mike Maker. And Libretto certainly has an opportunity to step forward. I question the distance a little for her, but tactically speaking, you're absolutely right. If she's put on the front end, like Dylan has finally been doing lately, and that's when he rides best, is being aggressive, that could always be kind of the great equalizer.
Absolutely. So that's a fun race, though. A lot of really talented fillies in this one. So excited to see how this race turns out. Let's move to race number 3, which is a $12,500 claimer going a mile for 4-year-olds and up. We're on the dirt. And this one, ACACIA, I'll be honest, there are some races where it takes me, 2 minutes to figure out who I'm going with as my top pick. There are other races that take me 45 minutes. And this is one that I just kept going back and forth on. And there are 4 horses that are 7-2 or less on the morning line. And I just had a really hard time differentiating them. Talk to me a little bit about a horse that I obviously took a really long look at in Cool Quartet as your top pick.
Yeah, I had a really tough time with this race too. I think in large part because they're very evenly matched, this group. And then you have a couple of horses that I'm sure we'll get to in a moment that are reclaims and are really intriguing. But as far as Cool Quartet does go, back down to the 12.5. He ran at this level 2 starts back. And while I thought the rider that day did nothing wrong and finished second by a neck behind Don't Be Late, who came back to win again, you do see Irad Ortiz take the call that's not going to help the price. If anybody's going to end up kind of defaulting in this race, it could be to the one that Irad is riding. But I do think Truculent will be the favorite in here. But that said, this is a horse who has shown some positional speed in the past. He'd had the bad habit of not getting out of the gate well and kind of stumbling. Now he's just a little bit sluggish. So I'm hoping getting back to what I think is the right level for him, back to a fast track as well, and maybe just finding the right kind of group. On paper, at least, it looks like there should be a fair amount of pace.
Absolutely. I totally agreed. And I ultimately went to the number 7 Caribbean, however you want to pronounce it. But this is a reclaim, obviously, for Oscar Barrera. This was a horse that was in this barn, then went to Linda Rice, now is back with Barrera. You have Madison Oliver up on the mount. And this horse, I think, will be sitting, halfway in a halfway decent spot early, probably mid-pack. And I just think you mentioned there's a lot of speed in this race. I think this horse can kind of sit the right type of a trip. The speed figures generally fit at this level. And this horse has turned in some nice efforts in this kind of claiming 12.5, claiming 10 kind of category. 7-2 on the morning line. Maybe that price actually floats up a little bit, but I like the fact this horse has nice late speed in this particular race. But you mentioned the other favorite in this one, Truculent. And I'm sure Jose wishes that this horse is not truculent and does not live up to its name. But this Linda Rice is on fire up in NYRA right now and winning a lot. So it makes a lot of sense here. But what did you see from the favorite?
Well, one thing I think is really interesting is that this is actually the 3rd time that Linda has claimed this horse. And one thing we really know about the barn is that she's very, very sharp with claiming horses and which ones fit. And yes, this horse won last time out. That was going a mile and an eighth. We'll cut back to the mile today. I certainly don't mind that, though I do think he maybe prefers a touch longer, but I think that he's got tactical speed. He can be forward. He can be stalking if needed. Jose Ortiz and Linda Rice teaming up. And like I said, more than anything, you've got a horse that's in good form and seems to carry his form no matter who has him and what barn he's in. And also the 3rd time that Linda dips back in for him. That speaks to a lot of intent for me. And it's with Winning Move as well. They go back in for the 3rd time too.
Absolutely. From a value standpoint, I think it's very hard to get past really those top four. But if you're trying to build a vertical exotic ticket, you're trying to find a double digit horse, I do think the 4 Jumpster is kind of an interesting play. This horse has a little bit of on off dynamics the last few times. If you think that form is going to hold up, should be the quote unquote on effort. And we'll see. This horse has had some success at a higher level claiming races. Actually does seem to maybe like a wet track, but it looks like it's going to be beautiful weather out there. But the other, very similar to my top selection, this horse should kind of be sitting second flight, I would imagine, or pretty close up, stalking the early pace. Maybe is able to get a piece at 12-1. But again, I think it's going to be a really tough race. Those top 4 are just really hard to get around, I think, in terms of how you want to play this. And to me, if you're playing horizontally, this feels like a very spready race. I don't have a strong opinion about my top selection. So this is one where I'd absolutely be using Cool Quartet and Truculent as well.
I completely agree with that.
So let's move on to race number 4, which is another maiden special weight. And this one is on the Widener turf course, and this is a maiden special weight going 7 furlongs for 3-year-olds and up, and this is a state restricted race for those fillies and mares. And again, we're in agreement here on our top selection. Yeah, we did well. Hey, great minds think alike, or at least we'll tell ourselves that. And so so we're up top there with Snowy Evening as our top selection at 9-2 for David Donk with Jose Ortiz aboard. And this was just a horse. Part of the reason was I started kind of drawing lines through other horses, and I thought, Souffle is coming back from a really long layoff and might just need one. And I thought the other horse that it was a rather low price on the morning line is the number 3 Spooky Lady, who's stepping, granted had a huge perk up on the turf, but is stepping up in class from maiden claiming to a maiden special weight. And so I landed on Snowy Evening as a horse that last 2 times out on the turf, I think has run well. I actually think the 7 furlongs is a better distance for this horse because of the running style of running a little bit late. And I just think if you start kind of drawing lines through some other horses, I think Snowy Evening makes a lot of sense. And you get Jose Ortiz, who's been on absolute fire up there at Belmont.
He's been riding tremendously at a 4-win day last Saturday. We'll see if that's the case this Saturday too. But yes, I agree with you. I like the 7 furlongs for Snowy Evening. I thought she took a big step forward last time. Loon Cry was the heavy favorite in that race. And this one was kind of chasing, and she finished well outside closing. I thought when John Velasquez, who rode her that day, tipped her out. I really tried to make a case for Spooky Lady, and I know that she's only had 1 race so far. Mm-hmm. Was it the turf? They ran just 1-2 around the racetrack. I do think she could be the controlling speed in here, especially with Kendrick aboard. I just really want to see it again from her.
Yep. Well, talk to me about a very intriguing horse, Lady Leoban, 6-1, that you have as your second choice here for Jorge Abreu with Irad aboard. This is, I was really interested that you selected this horse. This is one I took a look at as well, but talk to me a little bit about this one.
And, it's a tricky situation because there's a lot of unknown. We had this conversation yesterday when we saw Ever Summer come back in the second race, and she was making her first start of the year, and her last race had been an unfortunate incident where she did stumble and fall in the race. And so that's what we're seeing with Lady Leoban. Now she comes back relatively quickly after that incident. And she's had a handful of works up at Saratoga where Jorge Abreu is based. He has strings at both locations, but you'll often see himself up in Saratoga. So he's really been able to be with this filly, as she unfortunately did have a fall in that debut race. So you don't always know how they're going to do mentally coming back from that. I find that sometimes they don't come back the same. Some of them are totally fine, but some of them are not. And so that's a bit of a question in here. But I thought that the works were really forward. You had a really strong work up at Saratoga May 16th, and then a maintenance workout last time out. And I'm almost kind of treating her as let's give her a new kind of fresh start in here today. So I was basing off of those recent workouts and the fact that she was able to come back pretty quickly after that incident. They gave her a couple weeks, but starting May 3rd, she's been regular training to come back here for the races.
Yeah, and I definitely, it's funny. Whenever I think of horses that stumble and then come back, I always think of Midnight Bourbon, who fell in the
Mhm.
Haskell and then like came back
Yeah.
a month later, and was like, "I'm fine, I'm just running." And so, some horses, you're right, respond really well. Other horses, it does kind of change their temperament and running style a little bit moving forward. From a value play standpoint, I was looking at trying to find a little bit of a price, and Serrata, the number 4 horse for Harold James Bond, with Jose Torres aboard, was one that intrigued me. Another closer a little bit. And I think going that extra furlong, this horse had been running a lot of 6 furlong races recently. I think going 7 on the turf might be beneficial for this one. And I just think you're going to see this horse maybe pick up a little bit of pieces late, second back from a long layoff. So this horse has been having a lot of works too. They've not been eye-popping works, but they've worked this horse 4 times since that April 8th race. So this horse should be in really good condition and at least in good shape to put a step forward for Serrata at 8-1 on the morning line. Let's move to race number 5 and a $25,000 claimer going 6 furlongs on the dirt for 4-year-olds and up. And this was another one where I think you could go a lot of different directions. And you went with a horse that I also like from a value play standpoint. But First Deputy is a really cool horse. So talk to me a little bit about this one, 9-2 with Trevor McCarthy aboard.
Yeah, he is cool. And I know it's a little bit more of lower profile connections. And if you don't follow Belmont regularly, you shouldn't be afraid to take a horse coming from Lolita Schiff-Mongol. I think that she does a great job. Her horses always look terrific coming over the paddock. She had a pretty strong winter too. And this is one that's just dropping down. She's been facing so much tougher recently. I mean, Listen to Your Heart, 2 starts back that she ran against, has just been putting races together in bunches and in such good form right now. And Brew Pub, Unique Union, Foolish Ghost last time, significantly tougher competition. So she's dropping in for the 25 today. Her last win was at 25, but I know against New York breds, but I just think that this is the right spot or for him, this Ridgeling. And overall, even though he's been running against good company, he's been pretty consistent too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Agreed with everything you said about First Deputy. My top pick in this one is Lohengrin 2. Again, going back to the Oscar Barrera barn with Madison Oliver aboard. This horse should be the controlling speed and the kind of the speed of the speed in this particular race. It's just a matter of whether or not this horse will be able to wire the field. But you're looking at a horse that's 17 for 39 in the exacta lifetime, 9 for 19 in the exacta at this distance. It's interesting. Oliver's actually run this horse and ridden this horse to victory 2 times in the last 5 starts. So I do like that there's a nice connection between the jockey and horse in this case. And I just kind of went with the speed in this one, but hard to argue with any of the kind of top 3 or 4 choices here. And you also, as your second pick, went to a horse in David Jacobson, who's also been on fire with Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard.
Yeah, Andy Sterling and I were joking about this barn. It's almost kind of like you have no idea which ones are going to run and which ones aren't.
Yeah.
And so this one was one that took a lot of money last time, dropping in for the 16,000 and got the win with a big buyer speed figure. And the question is, can he do it again and stepping up to face a little bit tougher? But I've learned the hard way to always take a second look at the horses coming from this barn.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to race number 6 on the card, which is a $95,000 allowance going 6 furlongs on the inner turf for 3-year-olds and up, fillies and mares. And this was one, my top pick was your second selection. And I was kind of going back and forth between these 1 and 10 horses. I ultimately ended up on the 10 which is a Christophe Clement horse with Jose Ortiz aboard. This is a horse that's 5 for 6 in the money on the turf. Interestingly, though, has never crossed the wire first. Won by disqualification and placed first through disqualification, first time on the turf. And has racked up a lot of seconds and thirds since then. And again, we talked about how hot Jose is right now on the turf at Belmont. I just thought this horse's last couple of races very much so fit, second back from a layoff. And so I really like Gallon or Rush as my top selection at 7-2. I think this horse is going to really put on a nice late run. And Jose always manages to find his way through the traffic there up in Belmont, it feels like.
I agree. And, the thing about her is that before she took her winter break, they'd added the blinkers on. And you mentioned all of those in the money finishes. And I know it's really tough for a horseman when you try an equipment change and then you have to run on the surface that's not preferred for your horse. And so when
No.
she ran on the dirt and she didn't fire. So coming back last time was really the first time on the turf with the blinkers. She also had the layoff to contend with, and she looked great coming back off the layoff. And you can actually even see it in the short comment that Jose Ortiz dropped his crop. And that was also in a race where Lady Milagro was several lengths out in front and wired the field, and Gallon Rush came closing, and a rider had no riding crop. And I thought that she actually kicked in so much better. And she always comes with a good late run, but she nearly got there to a loose on the lead winner with overcoming a layoff, her first time on the turf with the blinkers, and a rider dropping his crop. So there were a lot of things going on in that last race. She does have the outside post to overcome in this race, but I think she's a cool horse. Now she's got to prove it that she can cross the wire first, and not, just being in the money type of filly. So that's what she has to prove in here today. But I think that last race can be really encouraging of her taking a step forward. I did go to the one Redefined, who actually will break just one inside of Gallon Rush because of the entry. But as far as Redefined, she was a heavy favorite last time. And I don't know, it was a really odd race down at Tampa when she got a little keen. She kind of wanted to do more, and then she was really wide and then just flattened. It was an odd race, and I don't think it's really indicative of her. And we've seen Tony Dutrow run several horses down at Tampa. Of course, Chad Brown starts a lot of maidens there. Tom Albertani's brought horses back off layoffs, and I've noticed that those horses that kind of start at Tampa really move forward in their next start and coming back to New York. And I thought that could potentially be the case for Redefined. Today has to be the day for her. And she has to show that she can run back to some of that 2-year-old form. But I thought that there was a potential, and also getting a little bit more distance versus the 5 furlongs down in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. For my value play in this one, I went to the number 60 Canter for Jorge Abreu with Katie Davis aboard. And this is one, obviously the horse, ran on dirt first time out at Gulfstream Park, then runs and breaks its maiden at Aqueduct going 6 furlongs. And the reason I like this horse a little bit, and this is, 12 to 1, you're going to get an honest price on this horse, I think. Abreu is actually 30% with last out maiden winners when stepping them up to allowance races. So, this is a barn that has a lot of success taking horses and capitalizing on that initial victory and success. I think Katie's given a lot of really good rides this meet. So I'm going to be using this one underneath in some exotics, exactas, trifectas that I'm going to be using. But at 12 to 1, you're getting a little bit of a price there on the number 6 Canter. So let's move to the number 7 race on the card, which is $90,000 maiden special weight, going 1 mile and a 16th on the Widener turf course for 3-year-olds and up. And listen, we're agreeing again, Acacia, and we
thought I was being clever.
Well, apparently we both are being clever here. And I actually have a very interesting statistic to share after you talk a little bit about the horse we both like up top, Leah Grimati's Fly Right.
Yeah, Fly Right is the full brother to Sail By, who was grade 2 winner for Leah Giamatti, and that one was actually pretty precocious. Now, though Fly Right is the full brother, he is a colt to a filly, and so he's a much kind of bigger, stockier type, and he was one that I always thought would kind of improve as he got older too. But I ran very well behind General Jim, who, as we know, has turned out to be a really good dirt horse for Shug McGahee, winning graded stakes on the main track. And then last time, after disappointing in the Pilgrim, when my note said, I really don't think he liked the soft turf in the Pilgrim. Because he's such a big, solid horse. And then last time he ran behind Ari Gold, who went out to win a stake in his subsequent start. So he's faced good company. He comes back here. Obviously, he was ready to run early as a 2-year-old. Maybe off a layoff, he can be ready. And he will be a bit of a price, I think, in this spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of these notes. The horse is also getting Lasix for the first time, and I was very much too attracted to the company that this horse kept. Like you said, Major Dude, General Jim, Ari Gold. There's just a lot of really good horses this horse has been running against as a 2-year-old. I will give out a little statistic. I know a lot of people are going to go to the number 8 redistricting for Chad Brown and Irad Ortiz Jr. And Acacia, I don't know if you know this, maybe you do because you obviously you eat, breathe, and live everything New York racing, but Irad is 0 for 21 riding Chad Brown horses on debut and maiden special weights on the turf at Belmont the last 5 years. And I reran those numbers 3 times to make sure I had them right, because it is impossible to believe. But I just, that was just kind of a bizarre statistic that I came across when looking at, DRF formulator. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes with that. And so that was kind of interesting. But so that's why I ultimately went away from there. But you went to Cumberland, the George Weaver horse, as your second pick in this one.
He's just run a good race last time. I think Calic, who we'll get to a little bit later, is a major player in the Pennine Ridge.
Yes.
And this is a horse who was very green in that race. He's actually been green in both of his starts so far. He's by Classic Empire, so maybe that's a little bit genetic too, but he's had a little bit of a freshening coming up to New York. But I thought getting more ground last time, he improved a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. For my value play, I'll use the When Love Takes Over, the number 3 horse, 12-1 for Andrew Lakeman with Trevor McCarthy aboard. This horse had a huge perk up on the turf last time out, going a mile, and will presumably sit a pretty useful trip right behind the early speed. Should get a first crack at the leaders at 12-1. I think there's a fair amount to like in that for that particular horse. But let's move on to race number 8, which is an $80,000 allowance going a mile and a 16th for 3-year-old Knott. And this is a state restricted race. And I didn't overthink this one. I went to the horse that's just been keeping much, much better company than everybody else. And that's Shadow Dragon, that was on the Derby Trail for Belmont, 2-1 on the morning line. Granted, you're not going to get much of a price. I'd imagine this horse is going to get bet down significantly from even that 2-1 price with Jose Ortiz aboard. But for me, I just couldn't get around this one as my top selection. But I'm really glad you picked the 6, because I was debating about using this horse as my value play and ultimately went a different direction. But Ormstown, I just talked about a horse that perked up last time out. This is a horse that also really stepped up last time out.
And my notes for Ormstown were that he would really appreciate more distance. And you can see that in that race. He just kicked away so impressively. And he also has some more speed. Shadow Dragon is obviously talented, and he's faced some really good horses. He just does not really have much early speed at all. I respect Shadow Dragon a lot. Obviously, the fact that he was second in the Holy Bowl, 5th in the Fountain of Youth behind Forte. He was really far back in the Wood Memorial, but he's a horse that is coming out of the best company. I do think he will be a short price as a result of that. And I just went with a horse that kind of has the last big win. And again, some more positional speed.
Absolutely. For my value play, I debated using Ormstown, ultimately ended up using Union Fleet at 6-1 for Jose Magana and Manny Franco. This just, to me, this is a very traditional undercard type of a horse. This is a horse to use underneath, kind of runs its race every single time, finishes 3rd and 4th a lot. And again, if you're building out vertical exotics, this horse feels like a natural use here. Well, let's move on to the Pennine Ridge, which is the highlight grade 2 race on the card, going a mile and an 1/8 on the inner turf. And I got to be honest with you, we have a heck of a 3-year-old crop of turf horses right now. And there's a lot of really good ones here. And we don't even have one of the probably the favorite in this race listed as our top pick. But I'll let you talk a little bit about Kalik for Chad Brown.
Yeah, this horse really took a huge step forward last time. And again, won that race over Cumberland down at Gulfstream. And I wasn't 100% sure what to do with him coming out of that. I liked him and just wanted to see it again, so to speak. And then last time, Red Ortiz put him on the lead. And this was a horse, he was so sharp prior to the race. He was really energetic. Everything in his demeanor said that he wanted to be forward. And I thought he ran really well behind what was seemed to be a pretty salty maiden special weight race. So allowance race. It's a jump now into graded stakes competition, but he has some early speed. He's obviously shown before that he doesn't need the lead to win. I think he's one that's improving back now as a 3-year-old. As far as Silver Knott is concerned, I think he will be the favorite. I know he's not the morning line favorite, but just the dominance that Charlie Appleby has had, especially bringing horses to New York in particular, and the fact that this horse ran so well in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, it came up the rail, but he didn't fire last time in the Guineas, and maybe it was the soft going, but I think sometimes you have to try to find a little bit of an opportunity to beat the Godolphin Blue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No arguments there. I mean, he's my top selection. He's very impressive. That run at the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was incredibly impressive last year as well. And, I do think he doesn't like that yielding surface. He didn't run particularly well on a soft surface as a 2-year-old. And again, yielding. But one of the reasons I like him, there's not a ton of speed in this race. And that last time out, he actually did get out of the gate pretty well. And I think he can sit a more useful trip this time. from a value standpoint, the number 7 Freedom Trail for John Terranova has run against huge company, has run against Talk of the Nation, Mostache, Nagarrock, Webslinger, has run against on the dirt against Instant Coffee, has run against these really big names, and obviously has not won in those races, but is not going to be intimidated by the other horses in this field. I feel like would need to take a step forward from a standpoint of speed figures, but at 12 to 1, I'm willing to use this horse underneath because I think either Major Dude or Silver Knot is going to be a very short price. So if you're looking to build out exactas, trifectas, that might be a useful one to use. Let's go to the bailout race number 10 on the card. $40,000 maiden claimer going a mile and a 16th on the Widener turf for 3-year-old and up in this state restricted race. And because I'm a Philadelphia Phillies fan, I could not choose Atlanta's Acuna as my top pick. There was no way that I was going to be able to do that. But you ultimately went to that one as your top selection at 6 to 1 for Bruce Levine. So talk to me a little bit about this horse.
I had a really tough time with this last race. This is a very, very tricky race. Ultimately, I wanted a horse that was dropping in class, and so that's what I got with Atlantis Acuna. It's all coming together. Who won last time was a horse that I'd really liked getting some more distance, and I thought ran against a decent field in that New York bred maiden special weight. He had been more forward prior to that. He had the layoff to contend with in that race. He's now dropping, softer competition. He's also, as a 2-year-old, he was kind of a big and lanky type of horse. So I'm hoping we've seen some more maturity physically coming back now in his second start as a 3-year-old. And I was just hoping Kendrick was aggressive with him. And he might be, he's 5 to 1 on, or 6 to 1 on the line. So hopefully he's a little bit of a price. I wouldn't want to take anybody at a short price in this race.
Yeah, I agree. I ultimately went to the number 9, the Thrill of Victory, as my top selection for Mike Maker with Jose Lezcano aboard. And, this horse is dropping in class as well, second back from a layoff and dropping back down dropping to, I should say, not back into, dropping to the maiden claiming ranks after running maiden special weights. This horse's turf efforts may not be overwhelming, but he didn't run bad at the maiden special weight level there. So on the class drop, I thought that one made a little bit of sense. And then for my value play, I ultimately went to the Raymond Handlebar, who has hit some big hitters. We remember Promiser America in the Gazelle, but this is a little bit of a makeover package. New barn, getting the blinkers put on, dropping down in class. And so there's a lot of things happening here. I'm a sucker for those types of horses in a maiden special or a maiden claiming race in particular, where we're trying a lot of new things and maybe one of them hits, but I thought at 12 to 1, you're at least getting an honest price there.
That's a little bit how I felt about the 12 Bad Larry, who I used underneath turf, stretching out, new claim. I think you can be creative in this last race.
Absolutely. Well, Acacia, I know you are a busy person. You got a lot of places to go, but I appreciate your time today. Thank you so very much for joining us on Capping the Card. And for all of you out there watching, make sure to press that subscribe button and like button and comment below with what your best bet was for the day. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you it's now post time.